there, I'm nicodehaan, and welcome to Living a Primal Lifestyle, where we explore a return to a balanced and more natural wild world.
To recover our natural health and regain our rights and freedoms. I'm Ellen DeHaan.
And it's a beautiful day in Durango, Colorado. I think I have the weather right here. Yeah, it's 57 degrees in Durango, Colorado. Feels like 48. It's going to be a high of 61 and a low of 45. We had a lot of rain coming through in the past.
Some major flooding in the area too.
Yeah, down in the lower elevations by the rivers and things like that, which is natural. So maybe we shouldn't be building close to a river. You know.
Just saying.
Just my thought. Yeah. So let me get to my script here for a second. Yeah, so please subscribe to our channel, hit the follow button, hit the like button. I got a little banner here that shows that. Also, we have a lot of products on Mother Earth Labs, which we use ourselves. So if you hit the link below the show notes, you can maximize your nutrition with products from Mother Earth Labs. And like I said, these are products and supplements that we use. Now we look at mainstream news stories about anti-aging, natural health, history, climate, as well as our freedoms, and we do our own analysis. So we have a couple of topics for today's show. They're in the show notes listed below in the descriptions. If you have any questions or comments, you can email me at nicodehaan@me.com, or just put a note in
comment
in the comments, in Facebook, LinkedIn, or Odysee,
where we post.
Yeah, where we post. Yeah, there we go. Ever since we've done twice a week or twice a month instead of just once every week,
you forget everything.
I forget everything we're doing.
Cheer up, honey.
That's okay. I'm not that concerned about it. It's a live show, so
that's right. You get what you get, guys.
Yeah, sure. So we have a couple of topics today. Well, I was listening to some music a couple of days ago, and it was American Pie by Don McLean.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the day the music died. And I started thinking about, the music. And of course, that was referring to, I think, the plane crash with Buddy Holly and Richie Valens and the Big Bopper. And that was our time of music back in the 60s, early 60s, maybe
late 50s.
Late 50s, yeah. But I started thinking, when was the day that
our food died.
Our food died and our nutrition died. And so I started thinking about that too. And of course, the first thing I think of is that for many, many thousands of years, we just ate off the wild land. No agriculture. We didn't hurt anything. Maybe we had a few animals around, but maybe dogs and things like that. But most of the time we just hunted and gathered some herbs and maybe some vegetables, wild vegetables, and
maybe
things like that.
Fruit during season.
Fruit during season.
Honey, if we could find it.
Yeah, and it stayed that way until one time, maybe thousands of years ago, maybe 10,000 years ago, maybe 6,000 years ago, it became more of a thing. And I think a lot of it had to do with the climate and how the big animals were really...
the Ice Age,
and
the retreating glaciers, and you had to eat, and they began shifting a little bit towards more sedentary life, not sedentary, but permanent lifestyle.
Yeah, started building more of cities and small towns and things like that. But in modern age, when I grew up, the biggest change was when we moved from Holland to Canada.
Yeah. So what were you eating in Holland?
Most of the time for breakfast, we were eating the meat and stuff that was from the night before, or
leftovers from
the night before, or we were eating some bacon and eggs, things like that, ham and eggs.
After the war.
Yeah. During the war, that was a whole different thing, and I didn't remember too much of that.
Well, you were just an infant.
Yeah, and of course I was breastfed for the first 2.5 years, and that was mainly because that's what people did, but also because of the war.
Yeah, what choice did you have?
Yeah, exactly. So, but when I was about 6 years old, going on 7, when we moved to Canada, and one day I remember my mother bringing in the Kellogg's cornflakes, and we had never really heard of this. And this was something new, of course, was being advertised.
Mhm.
So my thought was that the day the food really changed for me is when advertisings and TV started coming in.
Well, TV wasn't then. I think at that point, maybe the newspaper would have ads and the stores would have
Yeah,
ads.
and of
And
course the packaging and the type of food that we got. I remember we used to go weekly to the farmers
market,
stands.
the farmer's market.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it wasn't even a market. It was
Stands.
just stands
Yeah.
alongside of the road, and
Mhm.
that's where we get our food. But then it changed, I think, when we
Well, and
got
also you go to the local butcher,
yeah,
get the meat,
right.
and
And the milkman would bring the
bring
whole
the
milk.
bring the milk
There
with the
was no
cream
such
on the top.
yeah, yeah,
And the paper cover on the top of the bottle. It was a glass bottle.
yeah, it was all glass. That's right. So a lot has changed since then. So uh, and then in the '60s, I started. When I finished college, I really started thinking about my health, and I went on to these different kind of diets, like macrobiotic diet. That I did for a year or two, and that actually made me a lot thinner and not so muscular. And so I changed that, and I started going to more of a meat and potatoes, and what normally people ate during the 1960s. And I
Mhm.
was just dinner, breakfast was always bacon and eggs. We always ate lunch, of course,
Mm.
which we don't anymore.
Right.
But I'm thinking about what for you changed.
Well, when I was, I don't remember a lot about the food that we ate in my mother's house, my parents' house. Part of it is because it was what it was, and we ate it, but it'd be chicken or it'd be hamburgers or it'd be if a company was coming, we'd have lasagna and be some kind of meat and if my dad was cooking, he knew how to make franks and beans. That's what he made. And he would cut up the frankfurters in bite-sized pieces.
Right.
Then he put the baked beans in the pan and
Pretty easy.
saute
Mhm.
onions and spice it up a little bit. And we loved it. I mean, I think we loved it more because Daddy was cooking.
Mhm. It was something different.
It was something different and special once in a while,
Yeah.
and I mean, my mother would put together a meal, and there'd be maybe mashed potatoes, maybe some rice, maybe some kind of vegetable. And then, whenever I guess it must have been the late 50s or the very early 60s, when frozen vegetables came out, and they came, and then the ones that came in a pouch that you just dropped into boiling water.
Yeah.
My mother really liked that.
Yeah.
It
And
was
I think too, the big influence, we started watching TV, and I think we had only in Canada, we had one channel, basically.
mm,
I remember when we moved to Toronto for a couple of years, I could
it
get some
was
channels from America, and then we
from
had three channels.
Michigan or something.
That
Yeah,
was
yeah.
from Buffalo.
Oh, Buffalo.
Yeah,
Okay.
because we were living in Toronto.
Mhm.
So across the lake with the big
Mhm.
antenna, we could,
Mhm.
Sunday morning I'd be there getting the antenna all ready because I could watch Tarzan and some of the,
Saturday
movies
morning.
Saturday morning,
Mhm.
and cartoons, of course, stuff like that. But that had a big change because and then the advertising came on from the food. Now these days we see more advertising from drugs,
It's almost all advertising from drugs.
but then those days it was a
But
lot
in
of
those
food.
days, it was especially on Saturday morning, you'd get all of the sugar cereals.
Yeah, yeah,
You get Kicks Are for Kids
right.
and Tricks and Crazy
Fruit Loops,
Rabbit and all the
Frosted
sugar.
Flakes.
And of course, the kids would be watching it and say, "Oh, mommy, buy that!"
Yeah.
We'd go to the store and you see the package, and the kid would go.
Of course, if you know the history of Kellogg's and the two brothers from Michigan that
It's
invented
not
Kellogg's,
pretty.
yeah, he was a psychologist. He really thought bland
The one
food.
brother was.
Yeah, the one brother, and the other one owned all the cornfields.
Right.
Yeah, so
they
they got together and
figured
fixed.
out they should push the cereal foods and
And then for my mother, I still remember that, she puts the cornflake there. You could pour your own. You could put the milk on it. You put a little bit of sugar on it, and she'd go start cleaning the house.
oh, jeez.
So,
Yeah.
you know,
Well,
it's,
I don't ever remember anything except cereal for breakfast. And perhaps in the States, it was a little sooner than it was in Canada,
mhm.
which would make sense because it
Yeah,
was an American
industrialization.
company. Yeah. But I just remember cereal and milk and orange juice. You got to have a glass of orange
Right.
juice.
Yeah. And these were things that we never ate at all. I mean, this was completely
Mhm.
foreign food to us, especially us
Previously.
coming from another country.
Right.
But even if you were in America, I'm sure there was
Well,
one day.
if you think back on what happened at the turn of the 20th century, the 1900s,
Mhm.
and the markets, I mean, in the cities, everybody just went to the market
Right.
and and the food would be sitting out there, the fish and meat and vegetables and, what, potatoes, whatever, would be just sitting out there on display, and they'd bag it up for you
Right.
and send it home, and in the rural areas, of course, if you lived on a farm, you would just get your food from the farm and you didn't have to go to the store.
Yeah.
And, but I remember some things that stick in my mind from my early childhood when I was in, kindergarten and first grade was going to the A&P, the,
Yeah. Michigan.
that was
Yeah.
the
A&P too.
Atlantic and Pacific, uh,
Food company.
A&P.
Okay.
Yeah. And it was just a couple blocks away from our house in Florida, in Coral Gables, and we would walk up, and mom would go grocery shopping, and we kids would go look at the comic books on the stand. And I don't remember anything
Yeah, it was a
about
whole family affair going to the supermarket in those
and you
days too.
got dressed up.
That's, I remember.
Yeah, you never went to the supermarket looking sloppy.
That's right. You get dressed
Mom
up
would
just
have
like you were going to church
Mom
almost.
would have her makeup on, her hair was done, and that's the way it was.
Yeah. Well, when we first arrived, we lived in this little town called Chatham, Ontario, which is about maybe 100 miles from Detroit.
Mhm.
And we lived on a little farm because my dad was helping the doctor who owned this whole.
So
His
he
name
was
was Chartres.
kind of managing the farm.
Managing the farm and drove a Jeep and stuff like
Uh-huh.
that. We didn't have a car at that time. So when it was time Saturday morning to get the food, the four of us would walk to town
Mm.
to all these stands, which the farmers were bringing in.
Mhm.
So yeah, it was like a little outing for the whole family.
Well, then, and the thing is that I never lived anywhere except in a basically developed area. I mean, it wasn't necessarily a big city, but it was certainly a suburb of the city.
Mhm.
And so, I don't remember anything from the first 3 years when we lived in Chapel Hill, and Dad was finishing school and getting his master's.
Mhm.
And but we ate. So obviously Mom went to the store.
Yeah.
And but
Well, how about when we started going on our own? Like I remember I was going to college in Ann Arbor, and there were some health food stores there.
Oh, when I got out of college,
Mhm.
the first thing I did was find the what's it called? One of the very first health food stores ever and it was in Boston. And you could go in, and there would be barrels of oats
Right.
and barrels of things, and you could scoop your own stuff.
Yeah.
And it was very exotic, and I felt very grown up going to that
Yeah.
and choosing.
And the smells were so different than going to a grocery
And it
store.
was a wooden floor,
Right. Yeah.
wooden
Yeah.
barrels.
In Ann Arbor, it was called the Soybean Cellar. It was the first time when I remember. And they had a little restaurant also that was near the college, and it was called the Indian Summer. And I would go there in the morning, have my miso soup and things like that. But
all right, so then when I got out on my mother was not an avid cook. She didn't enjoy it. She did it because she had to.
Mhm.
And I think that maybe when she met my dad initially, that she didn't even know how to cook.
Oh, really?
And Dad did the cooking for a
Uh-huh.
little while, and he was still in the army,
Yeah.
And so I'm not sure how that went. Now,
Yeah.
all these questions I should have asked then, but I didn't know enough to ask then. Now there's nobody to tell me the answers, so
Mhm.
it's kind of it's challenging to figure it out.
Yeah, my mother cooked, and she was a pretty good cook. My dad was a chef for many years,
Mhm.
and a
So he
baker.
had
Yeah,
specialties that he made.
he made a lot of specialties, a lot of the Dutch stuff,
Right,
especially around Thanksgiving and Christmas
right,
time. We
right.
would have all these specialty Dutch treats, which I still love today, of course.
Oh, yeah. So it's his name a few, like
Like
Oli
olibola and the croquettes,
croquette.
chicken croquettes, or different types of croquettes. Those were the main things. And of
Mhm.
course, we had our chocolate, and we also had the sautertops,
Is
which
it
were salt
licorice?
licorice. Yeah, black licorice with
Very
salt on it.
salty.
Very salty. Most Canadian Americans never liked it,
Uh-huh.
but
Well, I don't like licorice of any kind, whether
yeah,
it's
I
salty
don't
or
like
not.
normal licorice. That I really like. They would make your mouth black, things like that.
Make your tongue
Definitely
black.
not healthy. But it was the 70s. Food started changing because we had like the TV dinners. We
Well, we
had,
never in my house. The TV dinners came out in the 60s
yeah,
actually
right.
because and so my dad was a drama critic and arts editor for the Boston Herald Traveler, so my parents were going out a lot. They were living in outside of Boston, and there would be premieres and openings of shows and pre-Broadway and so on. And so they'd get dressed up and go out. And we loved it when they went out because we got to eat TV dinners, which we enjoyed,
Yeah.
So they were different and they tasted different than the food we
And
were
the first
used to.
TV dinners probably weren't as bad and as much processed because I think as the industrial age
Mm,
kept going and they started wanting more profit out of these food companies, and I think one of the big changes was the stock exchange was really involved in these larger food companies. So now you had to not only because a normal farmer, yeah, he would make a little profit enough, to sell the food and make a living.
mhm.
But when you have a large company and now you have stockholders and
And
you and
employees
employees
and
and
equipment.
yeah, now you want profit and you want not only profit so you can pay your and
And pay your
improve
expenses,
like
right?
paying expenses, but
Mhm,
now you have stockholders that you have to have dividends to and things like that.
mhm.
So now your profits have to be bigger.
Right.
So I remember when I started selling retail stuff. I sold paint for many years at Sears after college, and then I sold furniture and things like that. And in the furniture business, the main profit was that whatever you took and you got wholesale, you would double the price
Mm.
and then add 20% to it.
Oh,
Then you could offer the customer 10 or
a
20% off.
discount, right?
So you'd have that margin,
Right.
and about 30% of that profit was for maintaining the building and the
Mm,
expenses of that, and
mhm,
the rest was paying your employees
mhm,
and keeping the business running.
mhm.
Nowadays, a lot of the furniture is marked up at 80, 90, 100, percent over that margin. And certainly our food is very, very inexpensive to make, and it's very expensive
Well,
these days.
because it gets shipped in from everywhere, so you have all the transportation costs, the gasoline costs, the handling and packaging costs.
Mhm.
I mean, there's nothing if you're not buying local. Well, the other day had some nice fresh blueberries, and they were delicious, and they came from Peru. I
Oh,
looked at
really?
I looked at the label. We've been buying blueberries that were coming from California,
Uh-huh.
but it must be the end of blueberry season,
Yeah.
and now it's summer in Peru,
Uh-huh. Mhm.
so we're getting blueberries, I
Yeah.
guess. So
And how much does it cost I mean,
to
how
get
ch
from Peru.
and how cheap is it for paying the people there to gather these things?
Mhm.
So, yeah, that's
Yeah, it's quite something. I mean, you can get anything you want. When we go to the health food store to the organic market, and we get the organic vegetable, the fruits. Occasionally I'll buy an apple and make some kind of compote for our
Mhm.
dinner,
Or some blueberries.
or some blueberries. And we walk in, and I look at the produce section, and you got now. I will say that they're seasonal because you don't get peaches all year round. You don't
Mhm.
get apricots all year round,
Mhm.
and plums.
But
You
there's
get them in
places
the
where you can.
summer. Yes, there are. But if you're going to an ethically sourced, natural food, organic kind of place, you're going to get and the blueberries are there, and they import the blueberries. So I'm not sure what the rationale is not to import the peaches, or, maybe later in the year when it's the end of summer in South America, we'll get.
Well, we don't eat a lot of that stuff, which is.
We don't eat it. That's right. But I see it,
but
and bananas are there, and avocados from Mexico.
Yeah. But the main thing that we buy is meat, of course.
Yeah.
So
we buy some avocados just to have a little extra something, maybe with the dinner.
Yeah, definitely.
Side.
Yep.
But but when I moved out of my parents' house, and I was cooking for myself, the very first thing I did, literally, was mix up a batch of Toll House cookie batter and leave it in the refrigerator. And I ate it without cooking it. It was so good.
Yeah, well, we did a lot of things, just like open the door and leave it open for a while, so the air conditioning the neighborhood. Look, Mom.
And the refrigerator. Yeah. Are you planning to air condition the neighborhood with it standing in the refrigerator?
Yeah, I remember parents yelling. And, I remember distinctly the 3 negative things my parents did to me was that shut the door, keep the refrigerator closed, and eat your vegetables. Because I never really liked vegetables, especially peas and stuff like that.
Oh, I love peas, but I don't eat them. Too much sugar.
So I thought we'd go to. I've got a couple of articles in here that go that, but I want to just get our own take on this whole thing. And I think it's the last 30 to 40 years that really changed the food.
Now, when did we start really changing our food?
When we started, when we got married, and
it was just
1995.
Yeah, then we moved to the west coast of Florida.
And we decided to go on this new diet that was called the 40-30-30 diet.
The zone diet.
Kind of like a zone diet, which was 40% carbohydrates, 30% fat, 30% protein.
That was also the Primal diet.
No, that was called the zone diet.
Zone diet.
Or the 40-30-30 diet.
Yeah, what was the name of the...
And then we went to the low carb diet. And that was around the year 2000.
Okay.
Then just before I started jujitsu in 2006, 7, whatever it was, we started more of a paleo.
Paleo,
yeah. So that's been over 20 years.
So that cut a lot of the carbs. It was much smaller, much less vegetables.
Well, the paleo diet basically was about 70% fat, 20% protein, and the rest was carbs. And then as we went along, the next few years, we started just eliminating more and more vegetables. We had a little bit of fruit in here like that. And by about 2010 or so, we started going more carnivore.
Okay.
So it's been over 10 years.
It's one of those things. It's a major change in my life, and it made a huge difference in my health and well-being. But it's one of those things where it doesn't seem like a milestone when you start it.
Right.
So you had to think back and say, when the heck did we do this?
Well, remember, we had a conversation. We met late in life. I was 50 years old. And we said, this is the beginning for us. So let's concentrate on our health. Of course, I've always been kind of a health nut I've always wanted to be healthy. I wanted to stay healthy. And that was
active and feel good.
Yeah.
The thing was, at that point, I was still buying food at the grocery store, the regular, the market, the big.
And you had bought some cereals, I remember.
Yeah. Okay.
And I was
I was eating whole grain cereals, thinking this was a really good thing. And I had a little bit of a dairy
intolerance.
So I was using soy milk. I thought, this is great. And so I would have my cereal with my soy milk, and that would be my breakfast.
Yeah. And these are the times when the food companies were really starting to dictate, low-fat diets.
Oh, what was that? Like early 60s.
Well,
The
some of these
Heart
articles will
Association.
probably talk about that. So
Okay.
maybe we should start with the article. This first one here, let me put that up, which is too much of a good thing, a
Of a
century of
food
change.
thing.
Yeah, too much of a food thing. Yeah,
A century of change in how we eat.
yeah.
So it starts with, think about the last meal you ate, whether it was a reheated plate of takeout food, a cornucopia of fresh fruit, or something in between. It probably would have been unfathomable to most people a century ago.
Yeah, over the past 100 years, the way Americans buy, cook, and dramatic changed dramatically, driven by developments in how it was manufactured, marketed, purchased, and eaten.
So Dr. Marion Nestle, who's a professor emerita of nutrition, food studies, and public health at New York University, said, quote, the increasing industrialization of the food supply has not been good for health, close quote.
Yeah, people used to eat at home and cook at home. Now they eat out or eat foods that have already been prepared.
Yeah, so many highly processed foods contain, and we've talked about this a lot because so much of the food is highly processed these days,
Right.
and they contain unhealthy amounts of salt, fat, the bad fat, and calories. And research has associated increased consumption of the ultra processed food with a higher risk of heart conditions and numerous other health problems.
Yeah, in 1924, the process that enabled the frozen food industry was invented. And while frozen fruits and vegetables could be a boon to health, frozen food was not the only change that would begin to shape the U.S. diet, says Dr. Ken
Albala.
Bala. He's a food historian at the University of Pacific in Stockton, California.
And Albala has written 27 books on food and edited many more. And he said that in the 1920s, most of what people ate would have been fresh, unprocessed, and locally grown. But change was coming. A few years earlier, in 1916, the first modern supermarket opened in Memphis, Tennessee. There's a trivia for you.
Yeah, and before supermarkets, shoppers would have a personal connection with the grocer at a local market who would have fetched the items customers asked for based on what the grocers had chosen to stock. The supermarket let people select their own items, which put a premium on branding as manufacturers sought to make their products stand out.
Yeah. So, but supermarkets, and I remember my mother going to the butcher, and and the butcher knew us, and would knew what kind of cuts of meat we wanted, and so on. But supermarkets also began distancing people from the source of what they were eating. Before that era, a family might have gotten produce from a stand, which would have sold local harvest in season. The new system favored mass-grown varieties that were bred for color, durability, and other factors. And I still remember going to the butcher in the grocery store, in the supermarket. My mother would go to the counter and talk to the butcher.
Well, in fact, in Florida, when we were living in Bel Air, Florida, there was a butcher shop that we went every week,
Right.
and we knew the people there.
Right. Yeah.
And here the same thing.
Here, yeah, you go up to the butcher shop in the organic market is a separate business.
Yeah. It's called tax. Yeah.
And you've acquainted yourself with the people who work there, and now they very often he'll go and just cut the lamb chops for you. And
well, they know the day that I'm there, and even if it's not in the case, he sees me. He goes, "Wait a minute! I'm cutting them up now. They'll be ready for you." My various cuts that he knows I want, and he has them ready for me. So that's
it's a nice thing. Plus, if anything happens, with organic food with no preservatives and so on, every once in a while you'll get something that goes bad before you can eat it.
And we go back to them and we tell them about it.
They don't even say boo. They just simply credit you for it. It's a great old-fashioned kind of thing.
Yeah.
So let's see what else we got here. Factory-made sliced bread surpassed home bakers in the 1930s, at the decade that also saw the arrival of processed legends such as the macaroni and powdered cheese in a box.
Wow. Yeah, the powdered cheese with sodium phosphate as an emulsifier.
And then canned pork shoulder with salt, sugar, and sodium nitrate as a preservative, also known as spam.
Yeah, that's right. It was World War II that brought radical changes as products and technologies developed to feed soldiers, such as canned meals, made their way into our homes.
And, Alvala says that you could say that the C ration was the grandfather of the TV dinner.
Certainly. No.
Okay.
So after the war, processed foods started appearing in packages that resembled the original foods, that they came from less and less, with an enormous emphasis on convenience.
And it was interesting because Dr. Nestle said there was a real concerted effort to make cooking look like drudgery and to take away the idea that cooking was something that was fun and pleasant that you wanted to spend time on. And we've talked about this at length about women being encouraged to leave the home and go into the workforce.
Huge difference, because we were talking about this yesterday as we were talking about what we're going to talk about on the show, and you said the huge difference was that the women now, and not only the women but also the children, were taken out of the home by the influence of TV and the drudgery of cooking.
Rockefeller.
Yep.
There was a group of people whose goal it was to get women into the workforce, so that the children would be put in school earlier,
yep,
and be able to be indoctrinated into the proper thought process.
Yeah, because you had no preschool back before World War II.
Right.
There was nothing before.
Yeah, and women.
I don't even know if there was even kindergarten. It was maybe just
there wasn't. And the children would be home with their mother, who didn't work.
Right.
Who stayed. You were a mom, and you stayed home, and your husband earned the money and was the breadwinner, or whoever was.
Yeah, in Holland, in fact, in our home, we lived in the back of a cigar store. That
your grandparents.
My grandparents owned it on my mother's side, and they passed it on to my parents. And so both my parents were home a lot.
Okay.
Because they were managing the store.
And it was also,
and I was
there was a war going on.
Well, that was after, I was just thinking after war.
After the war.
Yeah,
okay.
because I don't remember.
Right. Oh, you were born in
44.
Yeah. Yeah, so.
So as it says here, in the 19th century, usually only the wealthiest families would have eaten out for pleasure at restaurants. Chain restaurants appeared and then popped up in the 1920s, and 1950s brought widespread fast food. And I remember the first fast food restaurant in Canada when I was living in London, Ontario, was just outside of town, was the A&W. And of course,
for us, it was
amazing.
It was very good. But for us, it was the McDonald's, and it was way out on the highway, whatever, the US 1 or whatever it was.
Yeah, I remember the McDonald's too. That was in like 64, something like that.
Yeah, it was pretty early. It was early in the 60s sometime.
Yeah, I was living in Detroit then already, and we had migrated to the United States. So yeah, and McDonald's, the first one on Grand River Avenue. And that was cool because, of course, I was driving at the time. And
going to school? Were you
going? Yeah, I was just finishing up and then just entering college in 65, 64, 65. So the cruising, the
Grand.
Yeah, so you're cruising through, and all the chicks were hanging out, and, the guys were hanging out, and the hot cars, those were just like in I remember the movie Back to the Future, when he goes back, and the cars were there. And,
or
and that was the time
American Graffiti.
American Graffiti too. That was the time when he pulled into a gas station and they were wiping the windows, checking the tires, putting the gas
oil.
Yeah. All kinds of service, and it was 25 cents for a gallon of gas.
Right, or less at that time. Yeah.
So,
okay. So it says that
let's start with the
1950s brought widespread fast food that were meals that emphasized speed above nutrition. Spending on meals eaten away from the home, just where we just were.
Okay.
attitudes. Yeah, right here.
Okay.
Spending on meals eaten away from home eclipsed at-home eating finally in 2010.
So then we go down. That's the good news. The bad news is Americans are eating.
Well, the good news is that food was more abundant than ever, and it's
Yeah.
available in all kinds of ways. And technology and transportation improvements have brought exotic foods in from other parts of the world and the country, and that apparently, according to this, the money spent on food today is about 11% of their disposable income, and in the earlier time, it was about 1/3.
And I think that's changed now after COVID. The
Mm.
prices have really gone up because we're spending
Yeah.
a lot more money on meats.
Well, look at what you remember when your dad and my dad said to us as young adults. You should be paying 1 week's salary on rent, right?
Yep. 1 week salary on rent. It was 1 week salary on food and groceries and things like that.
Mhm.
And one week,
1 week on extras, like maybe a movie or something like that, and
Yeah.
1 week savings.
Yeah, that was the thing. So everything was
Mhm.
mapped out, and that's the way I tried to live
Mhm.
for many, many years.
Yeah, and it did right by you.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
But meanwhile, it was today. I mean, my God, you get a studio apartment for $2,000 a month. I mean, who can?
Well,
And
most of the homes
salaries.
around here, it's $5,000.
Well, the homes
Yeah.
is a whole different thing. But the problem is that salaries are not. There still are a huge number of people making $10,000 to $30,000 a year.
Well, I think it's 30 to 50.
Well, they're
It's most-
still.
I'm sure there's some making less than that, but right now the
I mean,
average
even
the average American salary right now is around 46,000.
yeah,
average.
but now you have kids,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
how the hell are you paying $3,000 a month for rent?
Yeah.
That's what, $36,000 of your 45,000.
Remember, of course, people who are listening may not be our age.
All right,
So
I'm
if
just
you-
saying that.
If you're like in your 20s, 30s, and 40s, you don't even
Mhm.
remember any of these changes
Mm-mm.
at all.
Mm-mm.
You just hear about them now because we're talking about it, and other people, I'm sure, are talking about them. But back in the 50s and 60s, somebody overweight is very, very unusual happenstance.
Right, that's right.
Yeah.
And certainly not kids.
Yeah.
Kids are running around and burning up the energy, and
Yeah,
they
and I think the stuff that's in our food these days changed that whole.
Oh yeah.
thing.
Well, what's been added to the food, what's
Yeah.
been
So
subtracted.
there
from
was a
the-
huge change in the 50s and 60s that changed the way we were eating, but they weren't putting as much crap in those foods yet. They just started to.
Mhm.
So it didn't influence our generation
It
as
took a
much
while.
because we were eating pretty healthy,
Mhm.
even though we were born, just after or during World War II.
Mhm.
We were still eating pretty healthy. And then the 50s and 60s, we were trying to eat healthy. But it was actually the last 30 years that really changed. So
Yeah,
when we,
and so it says here, the bad news is that with all the availability and abundance of food, Americans are eating all those calories. And Dr. Abala said the past century is the first time when a sizable portion of the population can actually overeat. And that was never the case in history before that time.
and of course, if you're overeating, the thing is too that everybody was kind of on this low-fat diet, and the low-fat diet makes you hungry. Something that we discovered when we switched over to
And it
carnivore.
doesn't create a good lasting energy base either.
No, because they encourage you to eat at least 3 meals a day with snacks in between. Something we don't do at all now. Now we have breakfast and dinner.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah. So that's changed. So people who take fat out of their diet are actually making themselves more hungry, so they're going to eat more automatically. And what's more satisfying than sitting in front of the TV eating some chips or stuff like that? That's, and you can't stop eating them. That was the advertising.
I bet you can't eat just one.
Exactly. Yeah.
Mhm.
So,
Well, it said more than 70% of US adults are overweight, and that more than half of what Americans eat on average is ultra processed.
yeah.
So Dr. Nestle said the abundance of food in the US means corporations have to work harder than ever to sell it. And so their efforts are frequently focused on making their products irresistibly delicious and with larger portions.
And not necessarily good for you.
Oh, yeah. She said that economics dictate that manufacturers emphasize not wellness, but profits. Food companies are not a social service or a public health agency, she said.
Yeah. I think we should go to the next article.
Sure.
And this was kind of interesting because it breaks it down by decade.
Yeah. And it's kind of fun that we were able to find this stuff.
Yeah, and this I got just because it took you back to World War II, when I think the major changes, because of course I don't remember anything before that time.
Right.
But it says here there are tables today.
Our dinner tables.
Yeah, our dinner tables, and this is a
And I mean, look at that picture. Isn't that
says
great?
our diet through the decades. How have our eating habits changed?
Yeah. And I mean, I look at that picture. Here's the wife, the mom, and she's wearing a dress and a full apron. She's got her lipstick on, and she's standing in the kitchen making food. I mean, it was the June Cleaver, Leave It to Beaver mom, and Harriet Nelson.
Yeah, all these shows that we watched.
And
all the women were at home.
Yeah.
Nobody was working, right?
So
1940s.
Okay, the 1940s. In the 1940s, the Second World War was going on. There was food rationing. There was a shortage of all kinds of foods. Meat, cheese, butter, cooking fats, and sugar were heavily restricted. But potatoes and other root vegetables and bread were very much available.
Yeah.
People ate a diet much higher in carbohydrates and lower in fat than we do today.
In the 1950s, people ate what was in season. There was no strawberries, fresh peas, or salad in winter. No one would dream of having their meal of the day without cooking dessert.
Main meal.
Main meal of the day without cooking a dessert like tapioca or sponge or custard.
Sponge cake,
Yeah. 1954,
Mm-hmm.
there was a rejoicing because wartime rationing had finally ended. And after rationing ended, people rushed out to buy butter, sugar, and white bread.
And bananas and oranges had virtually disappeared during the rationing time. Yeah. And now they began to return to the shops. And then doing your shopping at the food store was actually much more expensive than today. Food shopping, as I mentioned earlier, took up 1/3 of the average income compared to around 16% today.
I think that's changed now.
I think it's
up to probably 30%.
Yeah, because of the cost of food.
Yeah. 1960s were a decade of change as people began to take overseas holidays. Dishes like spaghetti, bolognese began to find their way into the diet. The growth of Indian and Chinese community meant, and this is a British article, of course.
Yeah, but it also was true of America.
Yeah. Fish and chips remained the most popular staple. That was a good fish in those days too.
And consumption of meat and sugar reached record levels.
Yeah, the white sliced loaf arrived, as did sugar-coated breakfast cereals, like we talked about. Tomatoes were available in the winter for the first time, and frozen food became a common sight in shops.
Yeah, 1970s marked the white sliced loaf became even more popular in its new plastic wrapper
with the balloons on them. I remember Wonder Bread.
Wonder Bread.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And little did we know that it should have been called I Wonder Bread.
What the heck are they putting in this?
Well, the interesting thing was bread had always been sold in wax paper.
Yeah.
Putting it in the plastic wrapper. Now that we know what happens with plastic and food,
especially early plastic, probably.
I don't know. It might have been better.
Maybe, I don't know.
Might have been better, but frozen food continued its onward march. Ready meals became popular, and supermarkets began their dominance of the food industry.
And there was also the last decade in which children could depend on a guaranteed hot meal in schools, since local authorities were no longer required to make one available. So that changed too. And I remember distinctly because of the change in the food. Yeah, I got the cereal and breakfast, but when I was going to school, I never liked the lunches at school. So my mother always packed the lunch because that was much more familiar to me.
Right.
So I never really ate lunches at school. But
Well, I ended up, I think in elementary school, I ate lunch at school. It was like cost 50 cents.
Well, I remember it was free for a while.
Yeah. But and then it was 50 cents.
Yeah.
And but then when I got to high school, my mother made my lunch for me. And because she made me tuna sandwiches every day because I liked tuna sandwiches every day.
Right.
I didn't want anything else. And every once in a while, she'd throw a bologna sandwich in there. I don't want a bologna sandwich. Give me tuna, So that was my lunches in high school.
Yeah. So
1980s.
1980s, the increasing number of working women helped to change the face of food in the UK, also, of course, in America. Out went meat, potato, and 2 veggies. In came microwave meals based on pasta. This is also a decade in which takeaway hamburgers began. Yeah, eating out and fast food came into, and milk was no longer something you found in glass bottles. That changed too. And that was the decade that the low-fat milk came into existence too. So no longer, you don't want to eat that whole fat milk, which made you really satisfied. And
it was much healthier.
Yeah, and the other milk would make you more hungry.
Okay.
So I really do think that nowadays there's a huge connection between these food companies and the medical community.
And the pharmaceutical.
Yeah, and they're all owned by very similar.
And a lot of the food companies are now owned by pharmaceutical companies.
And also that changed. Remember when cigarettes was starting to be frowned upon, and all these huge tobacco companies started investing in food companies.
Bought the food companies.
They bought the food companies, and they started using their same changes.
Addiction techniques.
Yes, exactly. So that was the first time in the 70s and early 80s you had chemists working on how to make this food more addictive.
Yeah, on the food instead of the cigarettes.
Instead of cigarettes.
Yeah. In the 1990s, the big supermarkets completed their dominance of the food industry. The range of products became massive and included previously unknown salad leaves and exotic fruits and vegetables.
Yeah, the move towards faster food continued in the 1980s. The average meal took 1 hour to prepare. By 1999, that dropped to 20 minutes. Breakfast became a casualty of speeded up lifestyle. Cereal bars were introduced, but many contained a high level of sugar.
Yeah, if you read the ingredients in any of those quote unquote power bars or health bars, they're full of, it's like high fructose corn syrup.
Yeah, and this is where the advertising again came in, health bars. I mean, no bar is going to be healthy.
Especially not the ones that serve drinks.
Well, those might be healthy. Okay, so in the 2000s,
the early 2000s.
Snacking continued to rise while fruit and vegetable intake declined.
However, the population soon began to become more aware of the issue of rising obesity rates and unhealthy lifestyles, thanks to documentaries such as Super Size Me, which focused on the impact of living on McDonald's meals, and Jamie's School Dinners, in which Jamie Oliver battled to make school meals healthier across the UK.
Yeah,
now,
something similar too.
Yeah, so soon foods high in fat and sugar, such as turkey Twizzlers, chips, and donuts, had disappeared from the schools across the country, and McDonald's added salads to its menus. I haven't looked at a menu in a school in this area, but I don't know. There was a lot of movement to get the soda machines out of the schools, and So I don't know where that stands right now, but
Yeah, in fact, I remember the story. I think I told this in a episode before that Coca-Cola went down to the Mexican government and offered them 1 year free in their schools to put Coca-Cola and their beverages into their schools. And that is exactly when the obesity rate. Remember
started to
that
rise. Yeah.
people who are indigenous, like the American Indians,
Mhm.
people from Africa that
First
came over,
Nations in
First
Canada.
Nations are much closer tied to the indigenous eating,
Mhm.
where in Europe we had started eating way different than the indigenous people of these countries that hadn't been invaded by the white man at all.
Mhm.
So their propensity to gain weight is much uh, higher
No,
because when they switch to like the American style diet,
no, when
they're
they
going to get fatter and fatter rather
when
than us.
also
Yes.
there's the element of setting up the reservations
Yeah, of
and
course.
providing the food to the reservations became all processed food,
Yeah. And then naturally
carbohydrates.
with the slaves too, of course. But only genetically there's a difference also because they're so tied to their
Well, we're all tied to the diet to which we were born.
generations.
Yeah.
Yes. And in Europe, we had already started that
Mhm.
decline
Mhm.
where they didn't. They were
Mhm.
eating great because they were living off the land.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, boom, they come to America and then look what happens.
Yeah. Well, look what
Yeah.
happens indeed. Well, first of all, you move into the big city and you have access to limited things. You don't get the fresh food, you know.
And yet this is advertised as good for you too. So there's big propaganda going on.
Okay.
And you want to fit in too, right?
Yeah. All right. Let's
Yeah.
the 2010s. The rise of the smartphone had a huge impact, not just on our social life, but also on our eating and health habits. Fast food delivery became available literally at our fingertips, while online streaming services made spending hours on the end of the sofa binging your favorite TV shows the norm. I think today it'd be YouTube, binging YouTube.
Yeah, that too. Yeah, and this is when plant-based diets increased in popularity too, concerned over climate change and all that stuff, and clean eating movements. Yeah.
Yeah, but
And also the rise in popularity of protein powders, weight loss teas, juices, and things.
juice
All of them.
cleanses,
Yeah,
and then also superfoods,
right.
avocados
And there's nothing
and
wrong with avocados, but
no, but they more exotic foods became available.
yeah. So here we are in the 2020s.
Mhm.
And of course, as the 2020s unraveled before us, the trend towards moving less, sitting more, and unhealthy eating habits only seem to be on the rise, especially with the COVID epidemic, lockdowns, closed bars, restaurants, ordering fast food, or cooking lavishly at home became one of the few remaining pleasures available for many people to enjoy.
And paired with the closure of gyms and the rise of working from home, much of the population has become more sedentary than ever before. With it being estimated, the average person has gained weight during the pandemic and didn't lose it when the pandemic was over.
Yeah, and there's also this, and I think people can read the rest of these articles themselves because we're running out of time. And also, it's the paradigm is that, well, the reason that you've gained weight is because you're not active.
Right.
But I mean, back in the 40s and 50s, people weren't any more active than they are today. It's the food that makes the difference. And it's the whole paradigm of eating all these carbohydrates, especially these processed carbohydrates with all the junk they put in it, adding the salt and the sugar, and not even the sugar. We haven't even talked about the change of sugar because, one type of sugar is one thing, but when you add now
pure cane sugar that's organically grown is
it's
one
a
thing.
little bit better, and
Mhm.
if you use it reasonably, then it's not going to be too impactful. But the reason sugar came into it because the cereals were so bad; they didn't taste that good, so you had to put sugar on
Oh yeah, it tasted like the box that came in.
Yeah, exactly.
Jeez.
So and then came the processed sugars, which is the high fructose corn syrup, which just changed everything. So yeah, it's been a real
But
battle.
plus, sugar is in so many foods now.
anything that's
And
processed,
ketchup,
it's either sugar or salt.
yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with salt if you add it to a normal meal, but putting it in these products and not using the high quality salts,
Mm.
certainly not using great sugars because you're
Mhm.
using these liquid sugars now, and
Yeah, and there a lot of them are industrial byproducts,
yeah.
and it's
So
just
the idea is that the
mm.
food has really changed, and that's why we're so unhealthy now. And it's certainly great for business. And these food companies are feeding us this thing, and the same companies that own that are probably involved highly in the medical communities, which is great for business too.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, because the
Keeping people
sicker we
sick,
are, the better,
the
the
more
more money
profit.
that the pharmaceutical
Yeah,
companies make.
and you don't want to be in that circle because Ellen and I have no health issues that we know of, and we don't take any medications. And you'll be 80 soon. I'm in my 80s, and I want to live. Like I said, I want to die healthy. So I want a really good quality of life. I don't want to take any medications. There's too many downsides to all this
Oh
thing, and we
man,
want to be active.
when you need a doctor to check for interaction of drugs, and then that's not a good place to be.
Yeah. So anyway, we just wanted to bring you a little bit of history and how it changed, at least in our lifetime. A lot of
Mm.
people who are now in their 30s and 40s haven't seen that large change. So I think these two articles, you check them out for yourself. They'll give you kind
Yeah,
of
they're
an
interesting.
idea.
Give you a good perspective
Yeah.
of
So
how things evolve.
anyway, that's the show for today. We're yakking enough here. So I guess we'll see you next time.
Be well and be safe.
Bye bye now.